The Other Lamb is a cult horror movie. The movie is about a man that calls himself the Shepherd, and he basically runs this cult with all these women, and it seems like all these women are basically worshiping him, in love with him, or mating with him, and it kind of seems like there's incest, as also the daughters are involved. Just classic cult stuff. And they basically live in these woods, and they've been living there for years. Well, one day a police officer comes and says, look, if you don't leave, I'm arresting you. Which basically they would separate him from his cult. But I don't think the police officers even realized it was a cult. They just didn't want them on that property. So they decide to just wrap it up and move somewhere different. And it just kind of becomes like this walking simulator to them just waiting to find their next location to live. And that is basically the movie without too many spoilers. So my review for The Other Lamb, and there will be spoilers in the review. A movie that actually had pretty good production and really good acting, but this is kind of like one of those classic, you need all the pieces of the puzzle to make certain films work, as just the story not even being like the concept bad, but just how it plays out in the movie for me was just insanely boring. And a lot of times some movies that play out like this with their pacing have like an explosive ending, and the ending will be your big payoff for kind of spending all that time watching the movie. But unfortunately, this movie just did not have that. And even when it kind of did come to the big payoff, they just killed the shepherd off screen, which was insanely disappointing. On top of that, just when they do end up leaving, it really kind of does just feel like a walking simulator. That's easily when the movie is at its worst. And yes, there is still a payoff in the end, but not even remotely good enough or big enough to make up for the fact that it was like an hour and 40 plus minute movie, and almost all of it was just boring as hell, and nothing really happening the whole movie. In my opinion, if they just did more shots of like when they showed the skinned lamb and had more of like that element in this movie and way less of the walking part, probably would have had a whole different opinion on this movie, but they didn't. And with that being said, one of the things I did like about the movie though was they did make the shepherd just seem like this douchebag, loser, deviant, bad guy kind of in the end. So I did want to actually see him get murdered, and that was part of the reason I was so disappointed that they off-screened him. Very disappointed in that. Woo! So with all that being said, my recommendation for The Other Lamb. For a movie rated pretty high with its ratings online, I actually don't think this is a good movie, kinda. And I would put this in the not recommended section, as I would just not recommend this movie based on its poor, insanely poor pacing, and just the end, there wasn't that payoff. In like Midsummer kind of has like that slow pacing too, like this movie, but Midsummer had that insanely explosive payoff in the end, which wraps the movie up beautiful and makes it just a classic, while this is what that movie completely missed. And also, the movie wasn't bad. Like I said, from a production value and just acting value, it was really, really good. But if I'm recommending horror movies, this would not be a movie I would recommend, as it was just completely boring to me. Unfortunately, that's my opinion, and other people might have different opinions. But it was just a snooze fest, and I just can't recommend that.